the headlines, Korea and the ASEAN announced a joint communique to wrap up their commemorative summit, outlining a vision to upgrade their strategic partnership and to further open up their markets. Korean Air's former vice president who stepped down from the post over her nut rage incident appears for government questioning and asks the public for forgiveness. And the CIA's director acknowledges abhorrent abuses by his agency but defends the overall interrogation program for stopping attacks and saving lives. Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to the newscast, coming to you live from Seoul. I am Kang Chae-ri. Leaders from ASEAN countries and President Park Geun-hye adopted a joint statement today at the Korea-ASEAN Commemorative Summit. A big part of that statement outlines a set of agreements aimed at bolstering their economic, cultural, and social ties. Our Hwang Sung-hee starts us off.
Noting that the launch of the ASEAN Economic Community next year will become a new growth engine for the global economy, leaders of South Korea and 10 Association of Southeast Asian Nations agreed to bolster economic cooperation. In a joint statement following the Korea-ASEAN Commemorative Summit on Friday, the leaders vowed to work towards swift negotiations for additional liberalization of the Korea-ASEAN Free Trade Agreement.
이를 위해 2015년 말까지 목표로 하고 있는 한 아세안 FTA 추가 자유화 협상의 순조로운 진행과 무역 원활화 및 제도 개선을 통해 현재 1,350억 불의 교역 규모를 2020년까지 2,000억 불로 확대키로 하였습니다.
President Park Geun-hye promised to simplify visa regulations for Southeast Asians entering Korea from the first day of 2015 and noted a new deal on two-way consular cooperation.
또한 양측은 인적 교류 연 700만 시대를 맞아 관광객, 기업인, 정부 인사, 유학생, 그리고 근로자 등 양측 국민에 대한 영사 협력을 강화해 나가기로 하였습니다.
The South Korean leader outlined Seoul's commitment to share its experiences with the so-called Semaul movement, which is an initiative that dates back to 1970s and is credited with helping modernize the nation's economy. She also vowed to invite about 100 people from the science and engineering fields each year for training programs in Korea. And to carry out these projects, President Park said South Korea will increase its contribution to the ASEAN-South Korea Cooperation Fund by $2 million to $7 million starting next year. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News, Busan.
And their joint vision for strategic partnership also discusses some other pressing issues as well that will work to meet both the traditional security challenges like North Korea's nuclear program and others such as climate change and disaster management. Our Choi Yoo-sun has the details.
Looking ahead to the next 25 years of their ties, the leaders of Korea and the ASEAN have agreed to work together to become a driving force for peace in East Asia.
동북아와 동남아의 안보가 서로 밀접히 연관되어 있다는 데 인식을 같이 하고 양 지역에서의 지속 가능한 평화와 안정을 조성하기 위해 안보 관련 문제에 대한 협력을 더욱 강화하기로 하였습니다.
On North Korea, the two sides stressed the need to reconfirm Pyongyang's willingness to lay down its nuclear arms. The 10 ASEAN members then endorsed President Park's policies towards the North, which include denuclearization and reunification of the two Koreas, first by way of trust building and non-political cooperation. South Korea and the ASEAN also decided to include human rights and democratic freedom on the agenda for their recently launched security dialogue. The 11 leaders in Busan spent some time on non-traditional issues as well.
The future challenges are not only related to current traditional security challenges, but also on non-traditional challenges such as climate change, environment issues, disaster management, and maritime security.
President Park, for her part, laid out a business model to counter the effects from climate change and natural disasters, calling on her counterparts to seize the chance and turn problems into opportunities. The president suggested joint projects to provide eco-friendly energy to remote regions of the ASEAN, help spur their agricultural production, and prevent damage from disasters. Back in Seoul on Saturday, President Park will wrap up her ASEAN diplomacy and summit talks with Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen. The two leaders plan to focus on creating a more favorable environment for Korean companies looking to expand into Cambodia. Choi Yu-sun, ARIRANG News, Busan.
The power of the Korean wave has been a force in bringing about closer ties with nations throughout Southeast Asia. And the first ladies of visiting ASEAN leaders got a chance to experience the culture of Hallyu firsthand. They got some star treatment, literally. Our Connie Kim has more.
Ask someone in Southeast Asia what comes to mind when you mention Korea, and the answer is more than likely to be the Korean wave. The region of more than 60 million people was the first outside of Korea to embrace K-pop music back in the late 1990s. The first ladies of the ASEAN member nations got a look at the place where the wave originated during this week's Korea-ASEAN Summit. Greeted by popular Korean actor Chang Geun-suk at the Busan Cinema Center, the ladies enjoyed clips of popular Korean movies that were made especially for the event. They said K-pop, K-dramas, and K-movies had captured the attention of the younger generation back home, and they look forward to what's coming next.
They like something very new, very exciting, very vigorous, energetic, and I think this is why they're very well received by the young ones in Malaysia.
As you may know, Korean movies are quite popular in Cambodia. Korean movies also play a role in educating Cambodians, as they view these Korean movies as role models for their lives.
It's one reason that the number of tourists from Southeast Asia has been on a steady rise in recent years. Last year, the total reached 1.5 million. Citing cultural similarities as one of the main reasons the Korean wave has gained so much popularity throughout Southeast Asia, the first ladies of the ASEAN member nations have expressed hope that the influence of soft power will continue to strengthen cultural ties between Korea and the region. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News, Busan.
Cho Hyun-ah, now the former Vice President of Korean Air, is facing questions from Korean aviation authorities as we speak over her so-called nut rage incident. Now, this comes after her father, also the CEO of Korean Air, held a press conference earlier in the day and apologized for everything. Kim Min-ji reports.
Korean Air's now former Vice President Cho Hyun-ah appeared before aviation safety inspectors for questioning Friday afternoon. Speaking to reporters, she apologized for her actions and said she would cooperate with the investigation.
I am sorry, and I will sincerely cooperate with the probe. I will also apologize in person to the chief purser and cabin crew involved.
Jo initially refused to show but changed her mind after prosecutors raided the headquarters of the nation's flagship carrier over concerns of evidence tampering. Her appearance comes after her father, the CEO of Korean Air, Cho Yang-ho, apologized on her behalf at a press conference and vowed that such an incident would not happen again.
대한항공의 회장으로서 또한 조연아에게로서 국민 여러분의 너그러운 용서를 다시 한번 바랍니다.
Jo was thrust into the international spotlight about a week ago after making a Korean Air flight from New York to Seoul turn back to the gate after a flight attendant served her nuts in the package instead of on a plate, apparently not following protocol. The government is currently investigating whether her actions broke air traffic safety laws or other regulations. She has also been barred from leaving the country. Jo first stepped down from her duties related to flight services over the backlash, but later offered her full resignation. She will also quit all her positions at affiliates of Korean Air. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
And one of the questions her father, CEO Cho Yang-ho, had to answer in that press conference was whether he will keep his title as a chief organizer of the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, and he said yes. And as a matter of fact, he released a statement today as the organizing committee head. Cho declined the International Olympic Committee's suggestion to consider holding some of the Winter Olympics events in 2018 in countries outside the host city, saying the proposal was not prudent. He went on to say that he appreciated the IOC's cost concerns, but added construction had already begun on all the venues. Meanwhile, North Korea has offered to host some of the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games alongside South Korea. The pro-North Korea Japanese newspaper Chosun Shinbo reported Friday that Pyongyang has said its Masinyeong ski resort could be used for events as it's close to Pyeongchang and the facility meets global standards. It went on to quote North Korea as calling it a possible opportunity from heaven that could contribute to inter-Korean reconciliation and regional peace. South Korea's Unification Minister Ryu Gil-jae is on a trip to Washington. There, he stressed to reporters that Seoul's plan is to peacefully reunite the two Koreas and not to absorb Pyongyang. For more, here is Park Ji-won.
Speaking to reporters in Washington Thursday, South Korea's Unification Minister Ryu Gil-jae said strained inter-Korean relations in the long term are not beneficial to either side, and the time to change things for the better is now.
Next year will mark the 70th anniversary of the nation's liberation from Japan, and it's time to make a breakthrough in inter-Korean relations.
The minister said President Park Geun-hye's envisioned unification drive is based on the North and South working and growing together. He stressed that South Korea's push to unify the two Koreas is not an attempt to absorb the North. Earlier this year, the South Korean president said unification would be a bonanza for the two Koreas. But North Korea denounced President Park's drive, saying she wants to absorb the North into the South.
I once again want to reiterate that our government's envisioned drive is a peaceful unification, not an absorption plan.
However, Minister Ryu said South Korea cannot turn a blind eye to North Korea's nuclear ambitions and human rights issues. So efforts to solve those issues will go hand in hand with Seoul's drive to improve inter-Korean relations. During his stop in the U.S. capital, the South Korean minister met with various U.S. officials, including chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee Ed Royce, where he explained South Korea's unification policies and asked for their support. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
South Korean opposition lawmaker Park Ji-won has asked to visit North Korea next week to mark the third anniversary of Kim Jong-il's death. In a phone interview with the Seoul-based Yonhap news agency, the Kim Dae-jung Peace Center said Friday that the lawmaker would like to visit North Korea's Kaesong Industrial Complex next Tuesday to deliver his condolences on behalf of former First Lady Lee Hee-ho. South Korea's Unification Ministry is considering this request. The proposed visit is considered a response to condolence flowers sent by current leader Kim Jong-un on the 5th anniversary of former South Korean President Kim Dae-jung's death back in August. When you buy a smartphone, chances are the purchases won't stop there. From protective cases and car chargers to Bluetooth headsets, the aftermarket for smartphones is a booming industry that shows no signs of letting up. Our Shin Se-min tells us more.
Virtually everyone has one. These little smartphones that allow us to be connected and to connect. With up to 1.4 billion smartphones having been sold worldwide, it has created another ecosystem that is expanding quite rapidly. From portable rechargers charging the device practically anywhere,
2 Bluetooth headsets for hands-free phone calls, and smartphone gloves that allow users to use the screen without having to take them off. These are just a handful of the products driving the smartphone accessory aftermarket.
I use a sturdy and fashionable case to help protect my phone, but I'm here to check out some other products, including the Bluetooth-related devices.
With just a few taps, this Bluetooth speaker is hooked up and you're ready to go.
Thinking out loud, maybe we found love.
According to US-based ABI research, the global smartphone accessory aftermarket will be worth more than an estimated $50 billion by the end of the year. The market for these accessories is increasing, despite smartphone shipments dipping as the market reaches maturity. Growth in the smartphone market is forecast to edge down over the next few years to just 6% in 2018. An industry watcher says that while smartphone sales are going one way, the accessories market is going the other.
It's not rocket science. Technology is being applied to things we already use. It's not really technical, so they can be created by individuals, and this diversifies the market.
While the analyst thinks camera-related products and accessories have the biggest room for growth, he says it's just a matter of how big the market will become. Even the industry's biggest players like Samsung and LG Electronics are hoping these kinds of innovations will boost their profits even as the smartphone market slows. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
The safety concerns at a new landmark in southern Seoul are piling up. One theater at Lotte World Tower has been temporarily closed after moviegoers complained about the floor and screens shaking and odd noises earlier this week. And this was not the first incident. Last month, the firemen were called in as a visitor reported similar issues. Lotte Cinema said safety inspections would be conducted to determine the cause. Its safety concerns have hogged headlines given water leaks and sinkholes nearby. The full opening of this tallest structure in the country is set for 2016. Following the release of a controversial U.S. Senate report exposing the brutal treatment of terrorist suspects by the CIA, the agency's director has now spoken out in defense of his agency. To tell us more about the story and others, Paul Lee is joining us from the News Center. Paul, there's been widespread condemnation of this intelligence agency from the White House to even the UN. How did the CIA chief defend these actions?
Well, through a press conference, U.S. Spy Master John Brennan did admit some of the so-called torture tactics described in the report were abhorrent and beyond authorization. But he said the enhanced interrogation techniques were necessary at times to stop deadly terrorism attacks and ultimately save lives. Our Connie Lee reports.
The director of the CIA defended his agency in a rare TV press conference on Thursday.
The detention and interrogation program produced useful intelligence that helped the United States thwart attack plans, capture terrorists, and save lives.
According to John Brennan, that includes useful information that led to the death of Osama bin Laden. However, on the question of whether some of that information was obtained without the use of brutal torture sessions or enhanced interrogation techniques, otherwise known as EITs, Brennan said that was unknowable.
Let me be clear. We have not concluded that it was the use of EITs within that program that allowed us to obtain useful information from detainees subjected to them.
The director's statements come just 2 days after the U.S. Senate released a report that said the CIA acted more brutally in its torture techniques of detainees after the 9/11 attacks than it previously acknowledged. Some of the brutal methods described in the report were waterboarding, severe beatings, and a method that led to one detainee to freeze to death. Although the CIA chief said the majority of his agents followed legal advice, he did admit that some actions were not authorized.
In a limited number of cases, agency officers used interrogation techniques that had not been authorized, were abhorrent, and rightly should be repudiated by all.
One U.S. lawmaker has called for Brennan to quit, while the United Nations and human rights groups are asking for the prosecution of U.S. officials involved in the CIA program from 2001 to 2007. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
And turning to Hong Kong now, order has returned to the heart of the city after more than 2 months of pro-democracy protests there, described as the most serious challenge to China's authorities since Tiananmen Square. So what's the current situation on the streets there, Paul?
Well, traffic is once again flowing through the city's financial center, where just a day before, a mass of barricades, tents, and demonstrators stood in defiance of the government. The resumption of daily life comes after Hong Kong police made good on their promise Thursday to clear out the main protest site in Admiralty. But activists there have vowed to continue their campaign through other forms of civil disobedience, recognizing the long road ahead in order to win their demands for fully free elections.
I hope through education, the public will understand how important democracy is to their life. It is not only about electing the chief executive. It also concerns their daily life, like prices of property, transport, and food. Everything is related. I hope through these acts that they will understand a lot of their rights were deprived, so they will join us next time.
Police say over 200 people were arrested last night during a final confrontation as authorities dismantled the main protest camp piece by piece. Among those detained include student leader Nathan Law, media tycoon Jimmy Lai, and several opposition lawmakers. Police plan to next clear out a second protest site in Causeway Bay, where only a few dozen protesters remain.
And the fallout from the massive hacking attack on Sony Pictures continues to widen. And now the company's co-chairman has offered a public apology over remarks targeting President Barack Obama, which were discovered in a stolen email. So tell us what was in this exposed message.
Well, the hacked email exchange between Sony Pictures co-chairman Amy Pascal and Oscar-winning producer Scott Rudin pokes fun at the president and which movies he might like, mainly naming films with African-American stars. This according to a report by media website BuzzFeed. In a statement on Thursday, entertainment boss Pascal acknowledged that the messages were real and expressed regret over the pair's racially insensitive jokes. Rudin, known for his work on the social network, No Country for Old Men, and a host of Broadway musicals, also later apologized. He said the emails were written in haste and meant only to be in jest. The two highly influential figures in Hollywood came under fire by civil rights activist Reverend Al Sharpton, who said the comments reflected the continued lack of diversity in positions of power in the industry.
And finally, a massive storm has hit the west coast of the U.S., forcing hundreds of flights to be canceled and leaving thousands of people without power. So give us the damage report.
Well, there's been tons of reports of severe flooding along California's coastal regions, while northern areas are struggling to cope with mudslides due to torrential rains and heavy winds in what has been described as the worst storm in the last decade. The Pacific storm plowed through the drought-stricken U.S. state on Thursday, bringing winds of up to 230 kilometers per hour, as well as the biggest snowfall in 6 years. Over 220,000 people had lost power, with cities south of San Francisco the hardest hit by the outages. This has some 240 flights departing and incoming from San Francisco International Airport were canceled. Weather officials expect the range of blizzard and flash flood warnings to last through this weekend. Charity?
All right, so certainly keeping an eye on that region. All right, let's leave it there for now. Paul, thank you so much for those stories, and we'll see you back here in just about 2 hours.
Happy Friday and welcome. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather forecast. So So we are wrapping up the week with snow falling nationwide. Conditions will gradually clear up by later tonight here in Seoul. But along the west coast, more heavy snowfall is forecast over the weekend with over 15 centimeters in store, while most parts of the central regions are looking at about 1 to 3 centimeters. Once the flurries taper off, temperatures will take a dip with daytime highs in some regions remaining below 0 degrees. Now, we're not done yet as we are in for another round of snow and even colder conditions next week. On to Saturday's readings. Seoul remains at -2, Gwangju hits 3, Busan reaches 5. On to other regions. Jeju makes it to 6, Dokdo reaches 2, Mount Kumgang drops to -12. Those are the updates we're following at this hour. Have a lovely Friday evening.
Thanks, Po-kyung, and that will do it for this edition of ARIRANG News. Thanks for watching.